All right, welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. We're tackling something today I think a lot of you can relate to. It's that feeling of wanting to learn English faster, you know, smarter. I mean, really, who doesn't, right?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
putting in the work, all those vocabulary lists, grammar rules, but sometimes it just feels like progress is, well, kind of slow.
For sure. It's a common struggle.
So this deep dive is all about uncovering the secrets to what feels like, I don't know, almost lightning speed learning for you guys.
Yeah, no magic wands here, just practical strategies and some cool insights from the science of how we learn best.
Right. We're not promising miracles, but we are going to explore what actually works. And specifically, we're drawing on a great discussion from the English Leap podcast.
Yep, that's right. Speak English with Class. Aaron and Evan, those guys had some really interesting stuff to share about this.
They did. Really interesting. And what we're going to do today is not just repeat what they said, but really dig deep into what it means for you specifically, for your English journey.
Yeah, it's taking their nuggets of wisdom and making them work for you practically.
Exactly. So if you're feeling stuck, like you're putting in the time but not seeing the results you want, then this is for you.
Definitely, because it might not be about working harder, but working smarter.
That's it. Smarter, not harder. That's the key takeaway today. So are you ready to unlock that faster, smarter learning?
Let's do it.
All right, let's jump in. One of the big ideas that really resonated with me from Aaron and Evan's discussion was this concept of meta-learning. Now, I know that might sound a little bit intimidating, a little bit academic, but stick with me. It's actually incredibly useful.
Yeah, no lab coats required.
Right, no lab coats. Basically, meta-learning is just about understanding how you learn best. It's like finding the instruction manual for your brain, specifically when it comes to learning English.
I love that, the instruction manual. It's like, how do I optimize this thing for language learning?
Exactly. And the really cool thing about meta-learning is it shifts the focus away from just the amount of time you spend studying to the quality of that time.
Yeah, it's not about just clocking in the hours. It's about how you use those hours.
Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of learners, maybe you listening right now, might be hitting a wall. They're putting in the effort, maybe even feeling a bit burnt out, but the results aren't matching up.
Right, and meta-learning suggests that instead of pushing harder with the same methods, it's time to examine the methods themselves.
Yeah, step back, take a look. Why are some approaches working better than others? To understand that, we need to think about what's actually happening in your brain when you learn something new in English.
Right, let's get a little bit science here. Aaron used a really great analogy to explain this. He said, imagine you're trying to walk through a dense forest. There are no paths, no trails.
No trails whatsoever. You're pushing through branches, tripping over roots. It's slow, tiring.
Yeah, sounds frustrating.
Frus-
And that's exactly what it's like for your brain when it's grappling with a new grammar concept or a new set of vocabulary words. Each new piece of information is like trying to hack your way through that undergrowth. But the more you practice, the more you use that new grammar rule or repeat that vocabulary word, you're essentially creating a path.
So those paths are the neural connections, right? That's how our brain cells actually link up.
That's it. Every time you learn something new, those tiny little connections form between your brain cells. And just like a trail in the forest, if you don't use it, it gets overgrown. So that information becomes harder to access.
Okay, so consistent practice, regularly using what we've learned, that's like walking that trail over and over again. It becomes clear, it becomes easy to travel. Makes sense.
Exactly. And here's where things get really interesting in terms of motivation. Every time you make progress, every time you recall that word you learned or you understand a sentence that once confused you, your brain releases dopamine.
Ooh, I like that. Dopamine, the feel-good chemical. So it's not just a sense of accomplishment. There's a physical reward happening in our brains.
Exactly. It's a built-in reward system. Aaron and Evan compared it to playing a video game. Remember that feeling when you finally beat a level you were stuck on? Or you unlock a new achievement?
Yeah, I love that feeling.
That's the dopamine hit. It makes you want to keep playing, keep learning.
Totally. I can relate to that in my language learning too. Even the small wins, like, I don't know, finally understanding a joke in English.
Exactly. Even those small wins count. Mastering a new word, using a grammar rule correctly in conversation, all those little things can trigger that dopamine loop.
It keeps us going. It keeps us motivated. But what about when you hit a roadblock? When it feels like no matter what you do, you're not making progress.
Right, like you're stuck on that difficult level in the game and the dopamine's dried up. That's when it gets tough.
Yeah, that's the real challenge. It can be so easy to just get discouraged and give up.
For sure. And that's where the importance of celebrating even the tiny wins comes in.
Absolutely. Because those small victories keep the dopamine flowing, even when things feel tough.
And that can make all the difference in pushing through those challenging plateaus.
Plateaus, yes. So to help us understand these different stages of learning, Aaron and Evan used a great metaphor. Imagine climbing a mountain.
Ah, yes, the mountain of language learning. I love this one.
Tell me about it. What are the stages?
Okay, so the first stage is starting out. This is when everything's new, everything feels challenging. You might feel awkward trying to speak. Things sound slow, difficult to understand.
Oh, yeah. I remember that feeling. So overwhelming.
It is totally overwhelming. It's like you're at the base of this huge mountain and you're just starting the climb. But then you start gaining some momentum.
Okay, so this is stage 2.
Yeah, stage two, you're finding your rhythm. Things feel a little less steep. You're starting to notice some real progress.
That's such a good feeling when you realize, like, hey, I understood that whole sentence in a movie without subtitles.
Exactly. Evan actually shared his own experience of watching an English show and realizing he didn't need the subtitles for the whole episode.
Wow, that's a big milestone.
It is. It means you're making strides. You're gaining momentum.
Love it. But then comes the stage, well, it's the stage most learners dread.
I think I know where you're going with this, the plateau.
Yeah, the dreaded plateau. It's like you're halfway up that mountain, and suddenly the trail just disappears.
You feel stuck. No matter how much you practice or study, you just don't seem to be making any progress.
And that's where a lot of people give up, right?
It is, yeah. Aaron and Evan really emphasize that this is a make or break stage.
Yeah, I can see why. You're putting in the work but not seeing the results.
Right, it's so demotivating. But the important thing to remember is it's a normal part of the learning journey. Everyone hits plateaus.
Okay, good to know it's not just me. And the final stage, of course, is reaching the summit.
Yeah, achieving your goals, reaching those milestones, you're at the top of the mountain, you can see how far you've come.
And enjoy the view.
Exactly, enjoy the view.
So for those of you out there who are maybe feeling stuck on that plateau right now, what can you actually do to keep climbing when it feels impossible?
Okay, so Aaron had another great analogy for this. Imagine you're walking through a desert. You're exhausted, you feel like you can't go on.
Sounds pretty bleak.
It does, right? But just when you're about to give up, you spot an oasis in the distance. That oasis is your motivation.
Uh-huh, that's a good one. So how do we find those oases, those motivational boosts when we're learning English?
One of the most important things is to actively reconnect with your why. Why did you start learning English in the first place?
Right, what's your purpose, your big goal?
Exactly. Was it for a better career, to travel the world, to connect with people from different cultures? Whatever it is, keeping that why front and center is essential for a long-term motivation. So take a minute right now and really ask yourself, why am I doing this?
Yeah, take a moment. And I think when you remind yourself of those reasons, it really gives you a renewed sense of purpose. It's not just about memorizing words or grammar rules anymore. It's about something bigger.
It totally is. Another really important thing is to actively celebrate the small wins. Those are like the little checkpoints on your journey through the desert.
Right, like little sips of water along the way.
Exactly. Did you have a short conversation in English today, even if it wasn't perfect? Awesome. Did you learn a few new words and actually use them?
That's progress.
Huge progress. Sometimes we get so focused on that end goal of fluency that we forget to appreciate the small steps we're taking every single day.
Yeah, and those small steps really add up over time.
They do. And if you're feeling stuck, another great strategy is to change your scenery.
I like that. What do you mean by change your scenery?
Well, if your current learning methods are getting stale, try something new. Join a conversation group, watch a different type of English show, maybe even try learning through music.
Oh, that's a good one. I've actually learned a lot of natural phrases and slang just from listening to English songs. And it doesn't even feel like study.
Exactly. It's a fun way to learn. And finally, don't underestimate the power of taking breaks.
Breaks. You mean like actually stepping away from studying?
Yeah, it might feel counterintuitive, but rest is crucial. It gives your brain time to process all that new information. It's like recharging your battery.
Okay, I'm definitely guilty of feeling like I need to be studying all the time. But I guess those breaks are really important too.
They are. They give your brain a chance to catch up. So if you're feeling burnt out, don't be afraid to take a step back and give yourself some time to rest. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Marathon, not a sprint. Good advice. All right, so we've talked about how our brains learn how to stay motivated. Now let's get to the really practical stuff, those actionable strategies to learn faster and smarter.
All right, tactics time.
Tactics time. And one of the most powerful principles that Aaron and Evan talked about was the 80-20 principle, sometimes called the Pareto principle.
Yeah, this one's a game changer.
It is. Basically, the idea is that 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts.
Right. So the key is to identify that 20% and focus your energy there.
So instead of trying to do everything at once, which can be overwhelming, you really prioritize the things that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck.
Exactly. And they gave a really great example of this in terms of vocabulary. Instead of trying to learn every word in the dictionary, focus on the most frequent 1,000 or 2,000 words.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because those words are going to come up over and over again in conversations, in books, in movies. Mastering those core words will get you really far.
It's like in cooking. You don't need to know every single fancy technique to make a delicious meal. focusing on the fundamentals will get you pretty far.
Exactly. Master the basics. Another strategy they talked about that might seem a little unexpected is journaling.
Journaling for language learning, how does that work?
Well, journaling can be a really powerful way to stay connected to your why. Write down your goals related to English. Do you want to order food confidently? Understand your favorite TV shows? Communicate with colleagues from other countries?
It's almost like writing down a contract with yourself.
It is. It's a way to make those goals more concrete and tangible. When you write them down, it's harder to ignore them?
Absolutely. I can see how that would be really motivating. So you're constantly reminding yourself of why you're putting in the effort.
Right. It keeps you on track, especially when motivation dips.
Okay, I like that. Now let's talk about something that I think every language learner struggles with at some point. Forgetting. You learn a new word or grammar rule, you feel great about it, and then poof, it's gone.
It's so frustrating, right?
It is. It's like, what was the point of even studying?
Well, that often happens because the information only made it to your short-term memory. It's like writing something down on a notepad. It's there temporarily, but it gets erased pretty quickly.
So how do we move that information from the notepad to like a permanent file cabinet? How do we get it into long-term memory?
Through practice and repetition. When you actively use new vocabulary and grammar, your brain recognizes that information as important, transfers it to long-term memory. It's like moving a file from your desktop to your hard drive. It's stored more permanently.
Okay, so repetition isn't just about rote memorization.
No, it's about strengthening those connections in your brain.
Like if you draw a line in the sand, the first time it's faint, it gets washed away easily. But if you keep tracing that same line, it gets deeper, more permanent.
Exactly. And every time you use that new word or grammar rule, you're deepening that groove in your brain.
I love that image. It's so clear.
It's like you're carving out a path in your memory.
Okay, now what about feedback?
Feedback is crucial. Think of it like a mirror. It reflects back to you your strengths and also shows you where you need to improve.
Right, you need to know what you're doing well and what you need to work on.
Exactly. And Aaron gave a great example of this. He said he was mispronouncing certain words for years until someone finally corrected him.
Oh, I've been there. It can be hard to hear your own mistakes, right?
It is. And without feedback, we might keep making the same mistakes over and over.
So whether that feedback comes from a teacher, a language exchange partner, or even a language learning app, it's invaluable for your progress.
Definitely. And finally, something that underlies all of these strategies is the power of mindset. How you perceive yourself as a learner can really impact your success.
Mindset, that's so important. If you constantly tell yourself, I'm bad at languages, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. But if you start to see yourself as a capable and confident English learner, your actions will reflect that. Even if you're just starting out, telling yourself, I'm a runner, can change how you approach exercise, how consistent you are. It shifts your expectations.
I love that analogy. It's so powerful.
It is. And what about when things get tough? When learning feels really difficult?
Yeah, that's when it's easy to get discouraged and think, maybe I'm just not cut out for this.
Right. But Aaron had a really interesting perspective on that. He said that difficulty is actually a good sign. It means you're pushing your boundaries, you're growing.
Okay, I like that reframe. It's like working out, your muscles feel sore because they're getting stronger.
Exactly. So when you feel that mental struggle, it means you're stretching your brain, you're making progress.
So instead of seeing it as a negative, we should embrace that discomfort as a sign of growth.
Absolutely. It's part of the process.
All right, so we've covered a lot. We've talked about how our brains learn, the power of motivation, strategies like the 80-20 principle, journaling, feedback, and of course, mindset. But to really solidify these ideas, Charlotte from the English Leap podcast also shared some key vocabulary words.
Oh, yeah, those were great. They really capture the essence of what we've been talking about.
Let's go through those words one by one.
Okay, so the first word is cramming. It means trying to learn a lot of information in a short amount of time, usually right before a test. That's Sophie spending all night cramming for her history exam.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
We have, haven't we? But for long-term learning, cramming isn't very effective.
Not at all. Okay, next word.
Trail, like the path hikers make through the woods. That's a perfect image for the neural pathways we create in our brains when we practice and repeat new information.
Those mental trails we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And then there's abandoned, like that spooky, overgrown house that no one lives in anymore. That's what can happen to those neural pathways if we don't use them.
If we don't revisit that information, those connections weaken.
Exactly. So consistent practice is key to keep those pathways clear. Next up is neuroplasticity.
Ah, one of my favorites.
This refers to the brain's amazing ability to change and adapt throughout our lives. Remember the example of James, who regained his ability to walk after a serious accident.
That's such an inspiring example. It shows that our brains are capable of incredible things.
They are, and it applies to language learning too. Your brain can adapt and learn new languages no matter your age or background.
That's so encouraging. What's next?
Plateau. This is that frustrating stage where progress seems to slow down or stop, like Sarah hitting a plateau in her fitness routine. It's a normal part of any learning process, and it doesn't mean you've stopped improving, just that you might need to switch things up a bit.
Right, a change of scenery, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Then there's momentum, that feeling of moving forward, making progress, like Liam gaining momentum as he writes his novel bit by bit every day.
Yeah, and that feeling of momentum can be really motivating in itself.
For sure. It keeps you going. And then there's repetition, doing something over and over again to strengthen those connections in our brain.
Like Anna practicing her French pronunciation until she got it right.
Exactly. Repetition is key for mastering any new skill, especially in language learning.
Right, what's next?
Dopamine.
Ah, the feel-good chemical.
Exactly. It's that reward signal our brain releases when we make progress. It motivates us to keep going.
Like when you exercise, you get that dopamine hit that makes you feel good.
Exactly. And it works the same way with language learning. When you experience those small wins, your brain rewards you with dopamine.
Okay, last word.
Focused identity.
Ooh, this is a good one.
It is, isn't it? It's about the qualities we associate with ourselves in a particular context. Like John, who consciously adopts the identity of a curious and engaged learner.
And that identity shapes how he approaches learning, how successful he is.
Absolutely. And Charlotte suggested actually trying to use these words in your own sentences this week.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It helps you internalize the concepts even more.
For sure.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that learning English faster and smarter isn't about some magical shortcut. It's about understanding how your brain learns best, keeping yourself motivated, and using strategies that actually work.
Right. It's about combining all those pieces, understanding how your memory works, celebrating those small wins, focusing on the most impactful activities, getting feedback, and most importantly, having that positive, growth-oriented mindset.
And remember, it's a journey, not a race. Every step you take, no matter how small it might seem, is progress.
Exactly. Celebrate those small wins, stay curious, and keep applying these principles. You'll get there.
So here's a final thought for you to consider this week. What one or two practical techniques from today's episode can you start using right now to really turbocharge your English learning?
Yeah, what can you put into action today?
And even more importantly, what small win can you celebrate for yourself today? Because every bit of progress deserves to be acknowledged.
Absolutely. Every step counts.
All right, everybody, that's it for the deep dive. Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep those oases of motivation flowing. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.